Good afternoon, Mark Sudduth here, HurricaneTrack.com, with your Hurricane and Hurricane HD video blog for Saturday, August the 11th, 2012. I wanted to take a look at climatology real quick. As you're probably well aware, as we get to mid-August, things normally start to increase pretty substantially. At least from a climatological perspective, we would expect to see an increase in tropical cyclone activity, with the peak of that reaching around September the 10th or so. It just takes a while, apparently, for conditions to completely become favorable, whatever that means, across most of the Atlantic. And there's a lot of different factors at play that can shape that. And if you have one key ingredient missing, which we obviously have right now, then not much will happen. Looking at the actual points of origin, if you look at all that on a map, you can see the area between Africa and the Lesser Antilles very much populated with activity. But notice the Caribbean Sea almost completely empty of any development points over the last 100 years until you get to the Western Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, of course, and a good part of the subtropical Atlantic, and the Eastern Pacific stays busy, as you would expect, through the month of August as well. But a majority of the activity that we see in August usually forms between Cape Verde, Africa, and about 60 degrees of longitude here, and with a pretty good clustering here just to the east of there. So keep that in mind, that once they get into the Caribbean Sea, these tropical waves, if they haven't developed by this region here, they usually won't until they either get into the Northwest Caribbean or the Gulf of Mexico. And that is the case as we look out there right now. TD7 no longer. It has opened up into a tropical wave once again, meaning that it no longer has a well-defined surface low, a low-pressure area completely closed off, with winds coming from every direction. It's just a little trough of low pressure down here instead of a round circular low pressure center. Then we have 93L, which is dying a slow death. Don't be surprised if it flares up once it's way up here, literally in the central Atlantic Ocean, oddly enough, where conditions will be more favorable than they are now over the deep tropics. And here's why. Look at all of this dry, sinking air still sitting out here. In many cases it is sinking air, and the sinking air warms and it dries out even more, and it's just keeping a lid on things. But we're still in the first third of August, just entering the second third, really. So this part of the year, as I showed you on the graph, we're still in the ramp up. It's kind of like a pot that's almost ready to boil, but not quite. And you can see it's pretty dry for the most part in the mid-levels in the eastern Atlantic basin. But once you get over to the western basin, especially in the East Pacific, very, very moist, unstable air exists. So it's just a matter of time. Once we do get something to develop and move west, it could become pretty strong if conditions allow. Sea surface temperature is certainly not the issue. It's more of this mid-level dry air and lack of vertical instability, or the atmosphere's ability to create thunderstorms and lift. In the East Pacific, no shortage of lift here. This is the leftovers of what was once Ernesto, that, as you know, came in here, hit the Yucatan, and came across. Now it is TD number 8E. Enough of its circulation survived that it is still pretty much the same guts, if you will, of what was Ernesto. But it's going to get a new name in the Eastern Pacific Basin once it gets there, and that will be Hector. And you can see a very nice monsoon trough of energy and just general low pressure hanging out around here. Had Ernesto not been a factor coming into the region, I think something would have developed out of all of this unsettled weather regardless. And then we have Tropical Depression Gilma slowly fizzling out over the colder waters of the Northeast Pacific Ocean. A quick look at the track for what will eventually be Hector. West for a while, maybe even a little bit south of west, as a strong ridge of high pressure builds to its north. Once it reaches the edge of that, it should start to turn, and its remnants may come up here eventually and affect the Baja, but it's going to be way, way weak, and probably just moisture, if anything, really. The water temperature's up that way, still a little bit too cold. Now the Gulf of California here is certainly warm and right near the southern Baja, near Cabo San Lucas, but I wouldn't worry about this too much. I don't see any hurricane threat from it, at least for land areas, so that's good news. The rest of the tropics, nice and quiet, and it'll probably stay that way as we move through the next several days. Nevertheless, I will have another video update for you tomorrow. Again, I'm Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. That's my website. Always glad to do these videos for you on Hurricane and Hurricane HD. Have a great rest of your weekend, but I will be back tomorrow with another video blog at that time.